open this up to comment, and for any committee members who have any comments or questions at this time.
Thank you. So, Mr. Callahan, I would like to say that I am fully behind the energy and the idea that comes with this ordinance. Without a doubt, I appreciate your concern for this matter at hand. There's no other way to say this, that this is important. It's something that, as many cities and states are struggling with. I do have some concerns. My questions I have a few. The first one is, this is the second time around for this ordinance before this committee. And it didn't pass last time. I was wondering if you could tell us why it didn't pass last time and what efforts you've done to address those problems.
It didn't pass last time because we never took a vote on it. We tabled it at the time. Or we didn't even table it. We just, the Human Relations Department had some concerns about being, commission was here, and they had some issues with how it would be implemented. So I talked to Mr. Spurk, he talked to the administration, and we worked it out where they won't be involved with it now.
But when you first proposed this, why did you have them involved in the first place? Like, what was their role going to be?
That's what, I based this off of the Philadelphia ordinance, and I gave it to Mr. Spurk from the Philadelphia ordinance, and I worked on it with some of the committee members that I was involved with, not on this committee, but on the committee that I had with Celestine and a few others. And we just decided, after I spoke with Mr. Spurk after the last meeting, that there was a way without getting the city department involved, which they thought would be burdensome. So Mr. Spurk spoke to Mr. Leeson and it was with Mr. Deschler, and a compromise was made so it could go straight to the magistrate. So that's what we did, and that's why we're here today.
And how is Philadelphia's ban enforced? What happens when someone comes to the city and says, hey, I had an interview, they asked me the salary. How does Philadelphia handle this issue?
They have a $2,000 fine right now. We're at $1,000 starting off.
But they use a Human Relations Commission in order to kind of validate the concerns and hear it all out and flesh it all out. And that's an enormous city, right?
Well, for some reason, I mean, you were here, they didn't want to deal with it.
I think, so that's one of my major concerns is a city like Philadelphia that has enormous resources in order to help people in the community who may want to come forward with concerns over the ban or violations of the ban. They have a commission in place that does all of this legwork. I am concerned that the people in our community do not have that resource. And in fact, the Human Relations Commission here was unable to even say that they could handle the load because they were not adequately staffed themselves. So I'm concerned about the ramifications of this ordinance without a proper methodology in place for vetting and handling the concerns as they come forward.
Well, I'm all ears for listening if you have any amendments that you'd like to make to it. Mr. Spurk, could you explain to Ms. Van Wert the process that we came up with?
Sure. Once our own Human Relations Commission essentially didn't want to handle it, the question then became, how would you enforce it? So we talked to the administration to see if there was some department or office within city government that could handle the complaints, and the administration felt that there was not. So at that point, the only enforcement mechanism left was for the individual, the person, the employee or the prospective employee who was asked a question or who felt there was reliance would have to go to the magistrate.
And hire a lawyer?
Well, you know, as a lawyer, I'd usually advise somebody to hire a lawyer when they're going to court, sure. But the system is set up that a private individual could go and file the complaint, and then it would proceed. If the magistrate thought there was merit to it based on what he reviewed or she, it would then go to hearing.
Okay.
That wouldn't necessarily, and what that would result in then would be a fine.
Right.
As set by the magistrate. It wouldn't result in any compensation to the victim. But in the absence of a department within the city that was willing to do it, or a human relations commission that was willing to do it, there was little other choice.
I understand. So, Mr. Callahan, when we were in the throes of deciding who would be the next council president, you called me up and you said you'd be willing to vote for Olga if I supported this act. And I told you then and there, I could not support this act as it was written because there were substantive problems with it. And I encouraged you to contact me, Olga, and Grace, because we have over 100 years experience as women who have been in the workforce, so that we could work on some solutions that would make this a workable act. And I didn't hear anything from you. So we're sitting down here again today without any changes to the same thing that I had problems with before, without you reaching out to the working women on council and asking, how can I make this a more valid, useful, and meaningful ordinance for the women of Bethlehem? I didn't hear it. So it's hard for me to jump right in and say, well, let's add an amendment. We've never had a conversation. And yes, I do have some real ideas about how to make this a more valuable document, including banning the laws that are rules within a company where women are not allowed, or actually employees are not allowed to share salary information with each other. I think that's a much more enforceable, much more valid, and easier to understand ordinance for businesses than this one, which is pretty much hearsay in many cases. So while I support the effort behind this, I have grave concerns about how it would roll out in this city and what resources would be available to the women who experience violations of this ban. I'm always willing to sit down and work with you on these ordinances.
I welcome any amendments that you'd like to make to it. I did talk to you about supporting Olga as president. I never heard back from her, but I did hear from you. I have talked to Ms. Cramsey-Smith several times about it. I had the impression from you that, from what you told me, that, and I don't know why, that you weren't in support of it at all.
Because I told you, actually. I laid out those same reasons I just gave right now.
You know,
and I encourage you to talk to me so that we could work on something that we could get past.
You know, I'm all ears. If you have, I mean, you understand something. This ordinance is basically the same exact ordinance that has been passed by 12 different states and multiple huge cities.
Right, and we're Bethlehem.
Right.
Well, right. So we need to figure out.
Maybe we need to tell the Human Resources Department that this is really important to women, you know, of color, and all women. And I think what we need to do is not look at this as business people, but as city council people looking out for women of the city.
Exactly, and I feel that's what we are talking about right now. I can't control what the Human Resource Department for the city can do, but I can say that if we are going to enact this type of ordinance, we've got to get it right. We cannot go about this kind of willy-nilly, and I think it means collaborating, especially with the women on council who have extensive experience here. So I'm willing to sit down out of committee and talk to you about ideas that I have. I'm willing to sit down as a group to do it within the sunshine laws.
Let's talk about them now, and if you have an amendment, we can add it.
This is not the time to add an amendment. I don't have it drafted. I would like to be able to look at other laws where they have done this on a municipal level and see what works and doesn't work.
I would suggest this.
The time, Mr. Callahan, the time to do this was before this committee meeting.
Ms. Van Wert.
Dr. Van Wert.
Councilwoman Van Wert, okay? In here, you're a councilwoman. Right?
Yeah. Councilwoman or Dr. Wilder,
right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, I had heard through the grapevine that you weren't in support of this for...
Well, then you should have checked with me directly.
Well, you could have reached out. If you cared about
this... Not my ordinance, Brian, Mr. Callahan.
If you care about the ordinance and doing what's right for the city and women, then this is the time right now to throw out some amendments. If you don't want to, take some time and you may vote against it. If you don't like it and Councilwoman DeGrom doesn't like it, pass it through to council with a negative recommendation. That's all you have to do, and and then we have time. It'll at least be another month before we have to vote on it. And you're gonna have a whole month to come up with any different amendments that you would like. But, you know, I think what you want to do is you want to stall it and table it and not do anything.
Completely incorrect, and you're assigning motives to me.
Well, that's the impression I'm getting. I'm not, it's my opinion.
That's not a valid thing to talk about right now. What we're trying to talk about are the next step forward. I
Right.
cannot support this because of the reasons I've outlined.
So
I'd like to
against
hear
it.
what the rest of my committee and Ms. Cramsey Smith have to say.
Very good.